You know that feeling when a song comes on the radio and you think, wait, what is this? And then 2 minutes later, you can't get it out of your head? The 1970s had more than a few of those moments. Songs that sounded like they had no business being popular. Too long, too strange, too unlike anything else on the airwaves, somehow found their way into living rooms and onto dance floors all over the world. And that's exactly what we're counting down today. 10 bizarre songs of the 70s that turned into worldwide hits. Number 10. Convoy by C.W. McCall. In 1975, a novelty song about truckers, CB radios, and a cross-country highway rebellion became one of the most unexpected chart toppers of the entire decade. Convoy wasn't sung in the traditional sense. Bill Fries, the man behind the fictional persona C.W. McCall, delivered the track almost entirely as a spoken-word narration, a fast-talking, jargon-filled monologue with a laid-back country chorus underneath. The whole thing was built around the CB radio slang that truckers used to communicate on the highway. Bears for police, chicken coops for way stations, front door for the lead truck in a convoy. The story itself followed a fictional group of truckers led by a driver called Rubber Duck, who rallies an ever-growing convoy across the United States in protest of the government-mandated 55-mile-per-hour speed limit and rising fuel prices. By the end of the song, the convoy has swelled to more than 1,000 vehicles. Fries had actually created the C.W. McCall character earlier, not for music, but for a series of bread commercials. He was working at an advertising agency in Omaha, Nebraska, when he developed the character for Old Home Bread. Those commercials caught on, and people genuinely wanted more. So Fries and his creative partner, classically trained composer Chip Davis, who would later go on to found the instrumental group Mannheim Steamroller, took the character into the recording studio. Convoy debuted at number 82 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early December 1975. 5 weeks later, it had climbed all the way to number 1. It also topped the country charts for 6 weeks. The single sold over 2 million copies, earned a gold disc from the RIAA, and was even listed among Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Country Songs of All Time. The song didn't just sell records, it helped ignite a genuine cultural craze. CB radio sales skyrocketed after Convoy hit the airwaves. Everyday Americans who had never sat behind the wheel of a semi-trailer suddenly wanted their own radio handles and their own slice of that trucker mystique. 3 years later, Sam Peckinpah directed a feature film based on the song, starring Chris Christopherson and Ali MacGraw. And the man behind C.W. McCall? Bill Fries eventually retired from music, moved to Ouray, Colorado, and was elected mayor. He served 3 terms. Number 9. Frankenstein by the Edgar Winter Group. The title alone tells you something unusual was about to happen. Released in 1973, Frankenstein was an entirely instrumental piece. No lyrics, no vocals. Just a relentless assembly of heavy guitar riffs, Moog synthesizer wails, and a rhythm that refused to let up. It was the kind of track that had no obvious home on commercial radio. And yet it climbed all the way to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May of that year. The song got its name not from the Mary Shelley novel, but from the way it was literally constructed. Edgar Winter and his band had been experimenting in the studio, recording different musical ideas across dozens of separate takes. When it came time to put something together, the master tape had to be physically spliced, cut, and reassembled by hand. The result was a track stitched together from so many different pieces that the band started calling it their monster. The name stuck. Edgar Winter himself was a multi-instrumentalist who played keyboards, saxophone, and guitar. He was also albino, which gave him a striking visual presence on stage. He had a habit of strapping a synthesizer around his body during live performances, wearing it like a guitar, so that he could roam the stage while playing. It was theatrical, and it was unusual, and audiences loved every second of it. At around 4.5 minutes, Frankenstein was long for a single in 1973. Radio stations sometimes played it in full anyway, because nothing else on the dial sounded remotely like it. It had the energy of a rock anthem, and the improvisational wandering of jazz, wrapped inside the futuristic sounds of early synthesizer technology. The track became one of the defining instrumental hits of the decade. Number 8. Ben by Michael Jackson. In 1972, a 12-year-old Michael Jackson recorded a ballad, a genuinely tender, emotionally sincere ballad about a rat. Not a metaphorical rat, not a slang term, an actual rodent. Ben was written for the sequel to a 1971 horror film called Willard, which told the story of a troubled young man who befriends a horde of rats and uses them to take revenge on his enemies. The sequel, simply titled Ben, followed a lonely young boy who bonds with the lead rat from the first film. The song was written for the closing credits. Jackson was selected to record it because his voice, clear, pure, and achingly sincere, could sell the emotional core of the song regardless of its unusual subject matter. And he did exactly that. He sang it as though he meant every word, as though Ben were the most important friend in the world.
Most people would turn you away.
The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October 1972 and earned Jackson a Golden Globe nomination for Best Original Song. It was his first solo number 1 hit. It's worth noting that Michael Jackson actually kept pet rats at home around this time. So in some ways, the song wasn't entirely out of nowhere for him. What makes Ben so strange in retrospect isn't just that it's a love song to a rat, it's that it worked. The melody was beautiful, the performance was heartfelt, and millions of people bought it, played it on repeat, and had no trouble setting aside the fact that the entire thing was about a movie rodent. Number 7. Hooked on a Feeling by Blue Swede. Before this song existed in the form most people know it, there was a quiet, sitar-tinged pop track by B.J. Thomas from 1968. It reached number 5 on the charts. Lovely, understated, unremarkable. Then in 1971, a British singer named Jonathan King recorded his own version and added something completely out of left field. A chanting hook at the front of the track that sounded like it had wandered in from an entirely different recording. King's version was a minor UK hit, nothing more. But a Swedish band called Blue Swede heard it, took that strange chanting hook, turned up the volume on everything, and turned it into one of the most infectious sounds of the decade. On April 6, 1974, Blue Swede's version of Hooked on a Feeling reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making them the first Swedish act ever to top the American charts. That same day, on the other side of the Atlantic, ABBA won the Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo. It was an extraordinary moment for Swedish pop music. The chanting hook, those unmistakable syllables that open the record, came from a 1959 song called Running Bear by Johnny Preston. Jonathan King had borrowed the chanting rhythm from that track. Blue Swede then amplified the whole thing, added blaring horns, and made it the centerpiece of their version. The story of how the song broke in America is a good one. A handful of copies made their way to the United States, where a woman in Connecticut played it in her record store. That led to some local radio airplay, and the song spread from there with almost no traditional promotion behind it. Number 6. My Ding-A-Ling by Chuck Berry.
Catch me playing with my ding-a-ling-a-ling, oh.
Chuck Berry wrote Johnny B. Good. He gave the world Roll Over Beethoven and Maybelline. He was one of the founding architects of rock and roll. His catalog was deep and genuinely important. And his only #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 was a double entendre novelty song about a toy. My Ding-A-Ling was recorded live at the Lancaster Arts Festival in 1972. It was a simple, audience participation kind of song, the kind of thing that gets a crowd laughing and singing along. The song had actually existed in various forms since the 1950s, including an earlier version Barry recorded himself called My Tambourine. But this live recording, with the crowd playing along, was the version that took off. It reached #1 in the United States in October 1972. It also topped the UK charts. Many radio stations refused to play it outright, finding the double meaning too obvious. That reaction only seemed to make more people curious about it. Barry himself never appeared to take the song particularly seriously, which was part of its charm. He had written some of the most enduring music of the 20th century, and here was a joke song carrying him to the top of the charts for the first and only time. He performed it live for the rest of his career. The contrast between My Ding-A-Ling and the rest of Barry's catalog is one of the more striking footnotes in rock history.
Catch me playing with my ding-a-ling-a-ling, oh.
#5, The Streak by Ray Stevens.
Yes, they call him the Streak.
In the spring of 1974, Americans had developed a brief and bewildering obsession with streaking, the act of running naked through a public space. The trend swept through college campuses, television broadcasts, and sporting events. A streaker interrupted the Academy Awards ceremony. Another ran across the field during a cricket match in England. It was everywhere. It was ridiculous, and it was only a matter of time before a novelty song appeared. Ray Stevens, a veteran of the comedic song format, had been writing and recording witty material since the early 1960s. He understood exactly what the moment called for. The Streak was built around a radio reporter narrating the chaos of a streaker passing through various locations, while repeatedly cutting to an outraged bystander, a man named Ethel's husband, who kept insisting he had tried to warn his wife not to look.
Oh, yes, they call him the Streak.
The song hit #1 in the United States in the spring of 1974 and spent 3 weeks at the top. It also reached the top spot in the UK and Australia. Stevens described it as one of the fastest-selling singles he had ever released, saying it caught the exact peak of the fad. What made The Streak hold up better than most novelty songs of its era was the structure of it. Stevens was a skilled enough craftsman that the humor landed on repeated listens, not just on first contact. The timing of the gag, the voice Stevens used for the bystander character, and the repeated build and release of the punchline kept the track lively. By summer of that same year, the streaking craze had largely run its course, but the song remained one of the most played tracks of the year.
Yes, they call him the Streak.
#4, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. In the autumn of 1975, Queen's management and record label were both convinced that Bohemian Rhapsody could not be released as a single. It was nearly 6 minutes long, far too long for radio at the time. It had no chorus in the traditional sense. It shifted between a quiet piano ballad, a mock operatic passage with layered vocal harmonies, a hard rock section, and a gentle, introspective ending. Nothing about it followed the rules. Freddie Mercury had been developing pieces of the song since his days at Ealing Art College in the late 1960s. The opening section, the dramatic operatic middle, the rock passage, they had all lived in his head in separate forms for years. When Queen recorded it in August 1975, Mercury reportedly walked into the studio knowing exactly what he wanted. The band spent weeks recording at multiple studios. The vocal harmonies in the operatic section alone required 180 separate overdubs, stacking the voices of Mercury, Brian May, and Roger Taylor, until the original tape had been used so many times it became translucent. The song found its way to radio through a DJ named Kenny Everett, who had a popular morning show on Capital Radio in London. He was given a copy with strict instructions not to broadcast it. Within 2 days, he had played it 14 times. Listeners flooded the station and local record shops with requests. EMI relented and released it in full. Bohemian Rhapsody entered the UK charts at number 47 in early November 1975. Within 2 weeks, it was in the top 10. By November 29th, it had reached number 1, where it stayed for 9 consecutive weeks, including the Christmas period. That matched the longest run at the UK number 1 position since Paul Anka's Diana held the same 9-week record back in 1957. In the United States, the song initially reached only number 9 in 1976, but in 1992, it appeared in the opening scene of the comedy film Wayne's World, and a whole new generation discovered it. It climbed back up to number 2 on the Hot 100. The video for the song surpassed 1 billion views on YouTube in July 2019, making it the oldest video to reach that milestone on the platform. It has since been inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame and the National Recording Registry. It is regularly cited as one of the greatest recordings in the history of popular music. Number 3. Kung Fu Fighting by Carl Douglas. This one happened almost by accident. In October 1974, Carl Douglas, a Jamaican-born singer based in the UK, went into the studio to record a track called I Want to Give You My Everything. That was the A-side. There was some time left at the end of the session, so producer Biddu suggested Douglas put down a throwaway B-side. Douglas had been watching the kung fu films that were flooding into cinemas at the time. Bruce Lee's movies were enormous worldwide, and martial arts had become a genuine pop culture obsession. He put together a simple song about it in about 10 minutes, recorded it in 2 takes, and that was supposed to be that. When the single was released, radio stations and listeners gravitated almost immediately toward the B-side. The throwaway track became the hit. Kung Fu Fighting shot to number 1 in the United Kingdom, and then, in October 1974, reached number 1 in the United States as well. It sold over 10 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling singles of the entire decade. The song's opening, a sustained, dramatic sting and a shout, became one of the most recognized sounds of the era. Its melody borrowed lightly from Chinese musical scales, which was unusual for a Western pop record at the time, and gave it an immediately distinctive character. Biddu, the producer who suggested the B-side in the first place, went on to have a significant production career. Carl Douglas never had another hit of comparable size, but Kung Fu Fighting is the kind of song that needs no sequel. Number 2. Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree by Tony Orlando and Dawn. The story behind this song begins not in a recording studio, but in a newspaper column. In 1971, writer Pete Hamill published a story in New York Magazine about a man returning home from prison on a bus, unsure whether his family still wanted him. He had written to his wife asking her to tie a white handkerchief to an oak tree near their home, if it was all right for him to come back. If there was no handkerchief, he would stay on the bus and disappear. Songwriters Irwin Levine and L. Russell Brown read the column and turned it into a song. They changed the handkerchief to a yellow ribbon, and the oak tree stayed, and brought it to Tony Orlando and Dawn. When Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree was released in February 1973, it became one of the fastest-rising singles of the year. It reached number 1 in the United States in April 1973, and held that position for 4 weeks. It also topped the charts in the UK and across much of Europe. By the end of the year, it had sold over 3 million copies in the United States alone, and was named the best-selling single of 1973 worldwide. On the surface, it was a catchy, upbeat pop song. The production was bright, the melody was easy to follow, and Tony Orlando's vocal delivery made it sound almost celebratory. But the story underneath it, a person returning from somewhere painful, uncertain whether they were still wanted at home, resonated with a country that had spent years watching soldiers return from Vietnam to uncertain welcomes. The yellow ribbon, as a symbol of waiting and welcoming someone home, took on a life of its own after the song. It became associated with military families, POW and MIA advocacy groups, and eventually, decades later, a much broader cultural tradition of displaying ribbons in support of service members. None of that was part of the original song's design. It simply grew out of what the song meant to people. The song was so odd in its cheerfulness about such a heavy subject. And yet it worked, precisely because of that contrast. Number 1. Silly Love Songs by Wings. By 1976, critics had spent years dismissing Paul McCartney's post-Beatles work as lightweight and sentimental. There was a perception in certain quarters of the music press that McCartney was coasting, that he was capable of deeper work, but was choosing instead to write pleasant, unchallenging pop music. McCartney's response was to write silly love songs. The track was released in the spring of 1976 as part of the Wings album Wings at the Speed of Sound. It was, quite literally, a song defending the right to write simple love songs, addressing the critics directly by asking what was wrong with expressing love in music. It was simultaneously an argument and an example of the thing it was arguing for. The song itself was a lush, multi-layered production with a bass line that McCartney played himself, one of the more distinctive bass lines of the decade, running underneath an arrangement of strings, horns, and layered vocal harmonies. It had a structure that circled and built in a way that was more sophisticated than its surface simplicity suggested. Silly Love Songs reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May 1976 and held that position for 5 weeks. It also reached number 2 in the UK. At the end of 1976, Billboard ranked it as the number 1 song of the entire year. For a song that existed partly to deflect criticism of being too commercial, it turned out to be one of the most commercially successful recordings of the decade. The critics who had dismissed McCartney's post-Beatles output found themselves in the odd position of acknowledging that the public had spoken, loudly, and for 5 non-consecutive weeks at the top of the charts. The 1970s were a decade that didn't always know what to do with its own creativity. Radio programmers were skeptical of songs that were too long, too strange, or too hard to categorize. Record labels pushed back on artists who refused to follow the formula. And yet, over and over again, the songs that broke the rules were the ones that lasted. Bohemian Rhapsody was supposed to be unplayable on radio. Convoy was a spoken-word novelty, built around trucking slang. Ben was a love song about a rat written for a horror sequel. And somehow, all of them found audiences that embraced them without hesitation. That's the thing about the 1970s. The decade had a remarkable tolerance for the genuinely unusual. These weren't just songs. They were moments. If you enjoyed this walk through some of the decade's most unexpected hits, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more stories like these waiting for you, and we'd love to have you along for all of them.